It's weird. Hi everyone, welcome to the weekly politics show. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood. Today's show we've got Assembly Member Murad Qureshi who's running again. So this show is going to be a bit different from the other shows. We're going to just do it for half an hour because of Ramadan. So we're just going to sort out the new schedule for Ramadan. So this show is going to be half an hour, and we're going to have Murad Qureshi first section about his observations under three different lead mayors, Ken, Boris, and Sadiq, and then we're going to focus on the issues around London. So join us after the break. Hi everyone, welcome to the weekly politics show on Relax Radio. I'm Councillor Premier with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood, and today we have a special guest, Assembly Member Murad Qureshi. So over to you, Murad. You're kind of like you're kind of special in terms of the current Assembly members because you've been there when Ken Livingstone was there. Then you've observed Boris Johnson's mayorship, and now you got Sadiq Khan. So you're like you're a bit like a permanent fixture in the Assembly, kind of it. So do you want to go into how you came about, how you found yourself into this role, and the differences you observed in terms of the three types of leadership?
Well, thanks for that, Puru, and thank you for both of you inviting me along this evening. But my story is a family story, really, because I mean, politics was always discussed on my dinner table. And it was predominantly the politics of a political exile from Bangladesh and what have you. But as a family, we did put our energies into local government. My father, in the 80s and 90s, became a councillor in the city of Westminster. I subsequently became one as well, and so did my sister. So we did cut our teeth in local government here, and where we focused mostly was in the city of Westminster. Now, with my political colours, that meant permanent opposition, and that's not much fun, I can tell you this. So when I looked a bit further afield, I thought, well, here's the London Assembly just been set up in 2000, and Ken Livingstone, actually, I did know of him before he became the first mayor of London, because he used to be a councillor for my bit of Paddington in the GLC. So that was a kind of that attracted me, as well as some of the things Ken was doing at the time. Meant that actually it seemed to be the logical place to go. And also, obviously, you have to have an interest in London-wide issues and things like transport, housing, and what have you. Very often, you've got to go beyond the confines of one local authority, and I do, and it's been a great pleasure, because one of the things you do find about London is that we're not only a city, we're actually a region. And by that I mean, we've got hard, concentrated urban centres like Westminster, Tower Hamlets, the City of London. But there are also 650 villages, would you believe it? And that's not actually hard to find, because if you go to places like Bromley and Havering and even the edge of Heathrow Airport, underneath Heathrow Airport, there are several villages. So I'm very privileged to have had that exposure, and certainly seen the impact that the morality's had in London. And I do think it has had an impact since 2000, because let's face it, the period between the closing down of the GLC and the mayoralty beginning in 2000 was an odd time, because it wasn't actually, we weren't able, people weren't able to find out what things were happening across London as a region, because the kind of the governance that was set up was something which was very haphazard. Here, it was quite clear. Saying that, there's no doubt in 2000, once creating the position, I wish they had put more powers there at the beginning. And we all know why that wasn't the case. There were particular interest in trying to stop Ken getting to become the first mayor of London and having an impact. I think he made an impact anyway with the limited powers, because I think the trick earlier on in the morality was to do the most with what little powers you had, like congestion charging and what have you, which were frankly very unpopular things to certain Londoners. But Londoners did actually give a mandate to Ken in 2000, just get on with it in central London, which he did. So that's one style of the mayor that I saw straight away. And our functions there are very clear, I think, as assembly members. Our ultimate power is that we can stop the mayor's budget being passed, and that if there is more than the mayor needs 9 assembly members on site to pass his budget. If he doesn't, then he's got problems. And we did have that, and politically, whilst we were Labour and Ken hadn't come back into the party yet, there were elements within the group, the Labour group, that were inclined to support his priorities, and he did get that support in the early days, and that continued into his second term. The only problem in the second term was that there wasn't enough Labour people. He needed 2 Greens on side as well to get his budget through. So he made concessions to the Green Party. Obviously, environmental concerns were very high. But apart from that, it's not only just the financial check and keeping the mayor to account. We also like to raise issues of Londoners' concerns. One of the first things I did, a few things I did on the environment front, for example, playing fields, the loss of playing fields. My knowledge of London essentially comes from playing football and cricket, pitches throughout London and beyond. And I thought there's a need to keep an eye on that, and I produced a report. Oddly enough, at the time it was launched, Prince Philip was actually the chair of the National Playing Fields Association, and they received that quite warmly. And I actually met him during all of that. The other issue is a very West End issue. I don't know, Puru, you've been there recently, but there always seems to be these rishkas, the pedicabs, and I'm not a fan of them. I think they charge extortionate prices for those fares that they do and what have you, and I don't think they really offer much at all, apart from the first time you use it. But I used it as an occasion to argue for them to be regulated, because I was concerned about the health and safety issues of these pedicabs in the West End on very specific trips. So that's the kind of thing you can do. Those were issues I picked up from my life experiences, as well as what I could see were issues. But Londoners can also approach us to raise issues, and we do that very often through the Mayor's Question Times, which happen every month, where we can raise issues that we think are pertinent for the Mayor to address. And in recent time, I've been raising housing issues in my second stint back at City Hall, and previously under the Boris administration, I was leading on environmental issues, not only for the Environment Committee, but also for the Labour group. So I hope that gives you kind of a feel for all the kind of things we had. My feeling was that with the Boris show, and I emphasise that, I think it was a show where I had a frontline seat, was a response, I think, to something which I think, Labour with Ken as our mayoral candidate at the time misjudged. I think after 8 to 10 years of any politician, people want to change, and we've seen that on a national basis. Whether the Margaret Thatcher, when a cabinet told her she has got to be moved, there's a similar thing with Tony Blair, and we had a similar thing with Ken. I mean, the interesting thing about Ken is that at least he had a second coming. He was the last leader of GLC and the first mayor of London, and I think he has got a proud track record of achievement. So that change to a Boris administration was intriguing to see firsthand, and there was a different emphasis, and it seemed to me that Londoners wanted a bit more fun, and things like the Olympics coming up helped, I think, to think in those terms, and yeah, and I think Boris Johnson and his administration did understand that. He also left at the right time. I think 2 terms of anyone, if you can't do anything in 2 terms, you're not going to be able to, as mayor, you're not going to be able to do much at all. At the beginning of Sadiq's time, actually, I managed not to get back into City Hall for the simple reason Sadiq won with such a landslide, it threw me off the assembly. And when we gained a seat in Merton and Wandsworth. And as a result of my return over the last year, I've been watching Sadiq remotely, dare I say, from my laptop at home. I've not been able to interact in the same way that you do in an MQT when you're stuck in the same room. But nonetheless, I mean, he's certainly competent on top of it. I think what people don't appreciate, I think that there is one substantial difference between Sadiq's time as mayor so far, 5 years, and when Ken and Boris were mayor, was that he's up against a national government of a different political colours. Whatever Ken's misgivings of the national government at the time, his 2 terms were under a Labour government at Westminster. Similarly, with Boris's dealings with the national government were through directly with Number 10 with Cameron and co there. Sadiq hasn't been given that luxury at all, and I think that explains a lot of the angst that we've seen. And I don't think in the end of the day it's helping Londoners on a number of fronts, which will no doubt expand into our second session this evening. But yeah, that's how I've seen it, and it's been a great privilege. I've also seen not only them, the three different types of mayors, but also seen. I thought I knew London well, but I've been given the privilege to see a lot more of it and how it all comes together. And I took a particular issue in water issues. Funnily enough, the mayor doesn't have much powers over the Thames, the canal, and even the Thames Water, who supply all our water in London. There are some other water companies. And that actually is a very, very important city issue. If you go in a lots of parts of the world, if the city isn't providing decent water, it's a source of major tension. And interestingly enough, the way the politics has been set up in London, actually us politicos can't say or do much there at all. But I tried to cross the political divide on that by being Ken's chair of the London Waterways Commission, and also Boris's, oddly enough. So, and I think the only reason why they let me loose on that front was because they knew they didn't have any powers, so that meant I couldn't have any powers. But it did give me a good insight on the workings of the Thames, things like the Thames Barrier, the way that well, hopefully we can encourage more freight along the Thames and take lorries off, and the importance of canals. I've always lived near canals in Paddington, so I appreciate them, but I'm not sure other Londoners have had the privilege of having a constant still water flow going past them. So yeah, I hope that's enough to get people thinking about possibly what to ask me, apart from what yourself and Andrew may, Puru.
Cool. No problem. We're gonna go straight onto a break now. We're coming up to a break. After the break, we're gonna go straight onto the issues, and some of the issues are quite hard hitting. We Andrew and I, we hear it on the doorstep. ASB, crime, the housing shortage, and also transport as well. Issues around, for example, the red route, which has been a massive issue in Tower Hamlets, which people feel Tower Hamlets has been picked up upon. But join us after break when we go into the issues in the London Assembly election, the mayoral election, and we're going to put them straight to Murad. So join us after the break. Hi everyone, welcome back to the weekly politics show. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Underwood. So today we have Assembly Member Murad Qureshi, and in this segment we're just going to go into the issues. So I'm going to hand them over to Andrew. Andrew, do you want to go through the issues that you're finding on the doorstep and put them towards Murad to get his views on them?
Yeah, so I actually did my first councillor surgery outside a few hours ago, sort of in a place called Mill Harbour. It was actually quite good. I actually had 7 people come up to me in the course of an hour. But actually Mill Harbour is the densest place in the United Kingdom. And it's very interesting that 5 of the 7 actually came to raise antisocial behaviour issues. And I think one of the problems I've always had is kind of like antisocial behaviour is kind of like a bit of a Cinderella service, both within councils and also with the Met Police as well, because it's a difficult thing for the police to deal alone with. So is that an issue that you're kind of picking up from other parts of London as well, that antisocial behaviour is a particular concern? Because I know in the last year it's definitely has increased in Tower Hamlets.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about I've been physically limited for obvious reasons about where I can go around and about. And in my immediate neighbourhood, along the Edgware Road, on the boundary of the old Paddington and Marylebone, that there have been issues like that, but there have also been dreadful issues, quite honestly, about stabbings. We've had far too many in my neighbourhood, let alone the whole of London. I mean, for example, in the last few weeks, we've had no less than two within half a mile of where I live, and neighbourhoods that I grew up. So those have been very prominent on my mind. I think police numbers are part of it, but I think offering youth services as well, young men particularly, other things to do. And we've also had COVID. I mean, let's face it, a lot of us have found ourselves spending a lot more time at home, working as well as living. Can you imagine what that must be like for the kids, particularly in places which are very densely packed and there's not much green space? So yes, there have been tensions there, undoubtedly, and very often I don't think it's necessarily a policing issue. It's only when people go over the top with it. I think what we need to do is build a London that is resistant to what gives us more space and facilities to live these lives in pandemics as much as when we get out of pandemics. I'm quite keen to see the nature of what we build now changing and given bigger considerations about more space within homes and outside of homes, so people are less confined. So I think it's largely a response to the pandemic restrictions we've rightly had on public health grounds. It'll be interesting to watch that one. Yeah. And there's also the particular problem of stabbings. I mean, for example, when I've been briefed by the police, they feared that there would be possibly more as soon as the restrictions and lockdown are rolled out.
Yeah, no, we've definitely had an increase in stabbings, and the first fatality, again, as you said, quite close to where I live as well, which we've never seen before. The other question I kind of had when you were talking about, the history of the 3 mayors is, I mean, there's an argument to make that Ken, has been far and away the most important mayor because he kind of set the foundation stones in a lot of areas. So, for example, the London plan, what's in the current London plan. Yes, there have been changes, but they're pretty much based on what he started. So would you agree that he has been the most consequential mayor so far in terms of what the mayors have done since his start?
Well, Andrew, you've taken the words straight out of my mouth. Yes, without any doubts. I think, he's. I think the trick that he did and understood was making the most of the limited powers he had at the time and not moaning about it. He just got on with it. And I do know that kind of the work he did in things like Crossrail 1, or the buses, and getting the Olympics. A lot of people still admire him for that, and it's actually in quarters you would least expect. I mean, For example, when I've when I've been in touch with London First and people like that, big business in London, they certainly think the foresight of Ken is something which we don't actually appreciate enough. I think what it was that he had a particular strategic perspective on London, which I don't think that we've seen much of, and it's rare, and it's not surprising actually, because being the last leader of the GLC, I think he had some idea of what he could do and what has to be done, and I think there was less emphasis on the media then. At the time when Ken was mayor, I don't think we had the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week media circus we have now, where things become news instantly and then dissipate. And I think one of the things anyone in public office has to do is get that balance right. I think between responding to events and actually and being on top of them. And I think very often that means getting your feet under a table. And that certainly was, I think, Ken's approach to things. He saw some strategic things that had to be done and he got on with it. And most of them he delivered, to his credit. I only regret that the bridge, Thames Gateway Bridge, wasn't built further down the river from yourselves. I think that was the only one which I think unfortunately didn't happen in his time.
Okay. So the next question is kind of about your role. And in the first segment, you kind of talked a bit about the things that you've done personally. And I've tried to describe what you do as kind of being like a councillor, but at a London-wide level. But is that true? And how would you describe your role? And what are the kind of things that residents should be coming to you for help with in the future? Assuming you're re-elected, of course.
Of course. Let's not assume anything at all. Because and that happened last time to me. So I'm certainly not taking any assumptions there at all. No, look, I mean, like councillors, we do have constituency work. I mean, most of ours come invariably by emails rather than surgeries as such, which is traditionally what I did as a councillor and what many councillors do. But we're able to get through to people at TfL, the police, the Met, and what have you, with queries that a council may not be able to. I'm not saying they don't have access, but I think the lines of responsibilities are clearer with the morality. Let's face it, most of the council tax people pay is paying for the Met, and TfL, if they may seem as though pretty unaccountable, they do realise that we in the Assembly can make a fuss about their activities. Recently, for example, I've been helping a lot of people with their parking fines, and by and by, I'm quite successful in getting those receded from them. So I hope people remember that when I've managed to do that for them. So that's the kind of day-to-day stuff that we get. One of the areas that we do, I mean, I've been the housing chair for the last year or so, housing committee, and actually it's funny, I've had exorbitant amounts of questions and issues raised from that, but I'm sorry to say the chair of housing isn't the same as the chair of housing in the old GLC. Neither the mayor nor the Assembly has any charge over properties itself. I've heard plenty of complaints, and I'm very concerned that many Londoners in housing association properties are not very happy at all. And I tell HAs very clearly that you need to do something. You need to be on top of this. It's all very well expanding your empires across 33 boroughs in the whole of London, but at the end of the day, people that are residents and tenants are going to judge you by the quality of the housing services. I actually did put in a complaint about one of the large players, and I still come up with instances which just stagger me, quite honestly. That I think is me taking a strategic perspective, whereas I think in councils you can only do it within your local authority boundaries. And let's face it, many HAs operate across many local government political boundaries. So that's the kind of day-to-day stuff. We do also kind of look more strategically at things. You mentioned the London plan, and it wasn't. I mean, I think one of the biggest influences Ken had was encouraged in the first format of the London Plan that developments can go up where the transport infrastructure can support it. And I mean, the best example I can give is actually it's not just in central London; it's at the town centres across all London. You know, the Uxbridges and what have you. The best example I can give you is in Hayes and Harlington. It's the last stop before you get to Heathrow Airport, and I've seen the skyline there go up substantially. So that came from the London vision, encapsulated it in the London Plan. And you're right, Boris and subsequently Sadiq have built on it, on top of it, and refined it not only for their vision, but also in light of present circumstances. Now that may critically change now. I mean, we're all aware that many of us aren't going to go back to offices and are prepared to work at home now, given that we've got used to that. And it'll be interesting to see whether we'll get as many office developments and whether all the office developments in the pipeline could be converted to housing, for example. That's something that if I get another term, I would be very keen to investigate on behalf of Londoners and councils to see how feasible that is. It's something I think we've talked about loosely, generically. People, when they've discussed such matters as one of the legacies of living through this pandemic lockdown. But yeah, I would like to see whether that actually has got legs. I know there's plenty of office developments that have come up around me in Paddington and Marylebone. Will they stand up at all now financially, and will they have to look at other uses? So that's a strategic issue which I think we can give some discourse on, and even the mayor, quite honestly. And who knows? I mean, a good mayor will pinch our best ideas, like Ken did as well. Ken did during his 2 terms as mayor of London.
Okay, so I'm actually also the councillor for Canary Wharf ward. So I've got Canary Wharf for my ward. So these are really live issues for us. Yeah. And the future of the estate, and what you said about housing associations is absolutely right. They're not as good as they should be. So we only got a couple of minutes left. So probably maybe the last question would be, obviously we've got the elections coming, and we've got lots of ballot papers, 3 for London. Maybe just worth explaining what the difference is between the 2 assembly member ballot papers, because I know some people will get confused by that.
Well, thank you for giving me a bit of scope to explain that. Essentially, there's 25 assembly members elected at the same time as the mayor. And there's 2 times. One has a constituency, a geographical area, and others, like me, have a geographic task of spreading themselves across the whole of London. So in your case, where you're physically based in Tower Hamlets, you have the City and East London constituency, and we will have, and you're incorporated with in that constituency with Newham, Barking and Dagenham, and the City of London. That's actually a huge constituency. So you'd have 1 assembly member representing you across all 4 local authorities on transport, environment, policing, housing, a number of things. I think it's far too big a plate. But an even bigger plate is for us London-wide assembly members. And that's on the second ballot, where you don't actually choose a name and a party, you just choose a party. And when you choose a party, they have a list system. And on the basis of the order of the list, they put forward people like myself to be brought into the assembly to lead on London-wide issues.
Okay, thank you.
And I think, if I remember rightly, I think that ballot is orange, and the ballot for the London-wide assembly is pink. But the pink may be the mayoral one. No, pink, yellow, orange. Sorry, yeah, pink, yellow, orange.
We'll remind people on social media which one. Yeah, and then the 2 referendums will be white. I know that. So
yeah. So I mean, that for those with postal votes, well, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be easier for you to do than going in on the day and filling in all 5 of your ballots. But I hope that the polling officers are patient when you're there with your pencil and pen to mark your preferences.
Yeah. Okay. Puru, you're muted.
Thanks, Murad, for coming in. We're at the end of our show. We're going to finish early today, 7:30. Next week we'll probably have a new time. We'll advertise, Andrew and I, and we'll basically carry on with the weekly politics show. But thank you again. Thank you, Murad Qureshi, Assembly Member, for joining us. But thank you, listeners, for listening in. I'm Councillor Puru with co-host Councillor Andrew Wood, and thank you again for watching the weekly politics show. Enjoy the weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.